Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Swim England webinar with the Inclusion 2020 National Steering Group. The full title of today's webinar is Inclusion 2020, Leading the Way in Inclusive School Sport. I hope you can all hear me okay. Do let me know if you can't. I just wanted to go through a little bit of housekeeping first of all. So I'll begin by introducing everybody. I'm Jessica Necki. I'm Product Development Officer for the Learn to Swim team. And today I'm joined by Vicky Wells, who is National Manager for Targeted Interventions at Youth Sport Trust.
Hi everyone.
And also some key representatives from our lead inclusion schools and pool operators who are heading up activity in their areas. With me, I have Linda Stacey, who is representing Newsham School and West Yorkshire.
Hello.
And with Linda is Gemma and June from Kirklees Active Leisure, who will be offering a pool operator perspective in today's webinar.
Hi.
I'm also joined by Rob Belbin, who's representing Bingham Valley School in Dorset. Hi, Rob.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Great. I'm just going to go through a few points, just to let you all know that all of our meetings are recorded. So if you'd rather not be identified, just don't speak during the meeting. You can still have your questions answered because we have a little chat box where you can write them down if you do have any questions to ask the presenters today. You all muted at the moment, which is excellent, but if I could urge you when you're not speaking to keep your microphone on mute so we can avoid background noise during the presentation, that would be fab. Questions, more than welcome to ask questions as we go through the presentation. You can do that verbally, or you'll see an icon on the bottom of your screen that says chat. That's a chat box where you can write your questions down as we go through. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation as well, or if you think of them as you go along and you'd like to write them down, do just add them to the chat box. And we'll monitor and record that and get those questions answered at the end of the seminar. If we don't manage to answer your question during today's meeting, we'll be able to send around some answers to those questions in the post-event emails, which will go out to you all. Okay, I'll hand over to Vicky now to begin.
Thank you, Jess, and good afternoon, everybody. So as Jess mentioned, my role at Youth Sport Trust is I have just the absolute privilege of overseeing the Inclusion 2020 work on behalf of our network of lead inclusion schools, two of which I'm delighted to hear on this webinar this afternoon, and no doubt a number are either listening live or be listening recorded later on. I think for me, and you can see some of the images there of the organisations that are involved in this work, and I'm going to bring those to life a little bit for you in terms of context before we get into the kind of detail of this particular webinar. We have a range of organisations that make up the Consortium for Inclusion 2020, which we are really delighted that we are funded by the Department for Education to deliver this exciting work. The overall outcomes for this webinar are on the screen now. In particular, it's around really sharing the experiences around work that's been undertaken to date around school swimming and water safety, particularly in relation to our young people with special educational needs and disabilities in our schools. And we felt this was really important to do at this particular part of the project. So it's been going for sort of almost 12 months now, and we'll start to have some final kind of examples of case studies and evaluations as we get nearer the spring term, end of March next year. But save wait until the end before we start to share a lot of the insight and the learnings. We felt it was really important that we share them as we go along, because actually the more we can share ideas and collaborate, the more hopefully that cascades into the impact for our young people we send in schools across the country. So we're going to look to share those experiences with you. We're going to hopefully share some top tips, and again from two of the areas that have been involved in this work to date, and also be able to identify and signpost to you the new school swimming assessment tool, which we will talk through throughout the webinar, but also some of the new resources, new ideas, new tools that have been emerging from this work. So as I mentioned, this Inclusion 2020 is a grant that has been provided by the Department for Education, which is around SEND inclusion in PE, school sport and physical activity. The consortium that I mentioned, you can now see on your screen. So it's made up of a number of organisations. So obviously ourselves as Youth Sport Trust is that lead organisation, but then we're delighted that we have strong partnerships with Swim England in terms of how obviously again this work is emerging. NASEN, so the National Association of Special Educational Needs, has been a great advocate in terms of the workforce and the support, particularly through SENCOs in schools across our country. Activity Alliance, again offering that expertise, particularly around the community setting as well as within inclusive PE. British Paralympic Association, really important, gearing up towards a Paralympic Games next year in terms of their involvement. And absolutely crucially, Lead Inclusion Schools are represented on that consortium, who represent the network of inclusion schools, of which there are 50, one in every county across England. So I guess my first takeaway for you, for those watching this webinar, if you're not aware of who your Lead Inclusion School is, then please look at the Youth Sport Trust website. Literally, a Youth Sport Trust Lead Inclusion School Google will bring it up for you, and you're able to see a really great map that highlights for you the equivalent of Rob and Linda that you'll hear from today in your county area. So I'm now going to pass you back on. Sorry, not yet. It's still me. So I'm going to just talk you through some of the swimming elements within Inclusion 2020. So swimming, school swimming and water safety forms a key strand within the wider grant of this work. And I've just popped up on the screen here some of the short and long-term outcomes that we are seeking to achieve through this really important work. So it's very much, as you can see, around developing and improving opportunities for our pupils with SEND, whether that be through new innovation, supporting the workforce, and really importantly looking at those transferable approaches, so that whole sharing of ideas and skills with schools for schools. And ultimately what we want is to have more young people engaged and actually really enjoying and finding a love for school swimming and water safety. There are 5 areas involved, so this is very much a pilot piece of work at the moment. So we've worked with 5. For those listening, your first question might be, well, how did areas get selected? So it was an open expressions of interest from the Lead Inclusion School Network. We had a really strong field of applications, which I think shows and demonstrates the appetite for this work in particular, and delighted that we have the 5 that you can see on the screen, 2 of which are highlighted in blue, are the areas that you're going to hear from in particular today, but no doubt as we go through the webinar we will reference some of the great examples that the other areas have been doing as well. So I guess at this point I will pause, and I will now hand over to Jess to take us through the first part of this webinar.
Thanks very much, Vicky. So yeah, I just wanted to get the ball rolling on this by sharing a couple of facts from the Swim England Insight team. So if we could just go to the next slide. The first one is an insight from 2018. This relates to swimming lessons outside of school, and I think really shows why making swimming an essential part of the school timetable offers a great solution to this challenge. I'll just read out this fact. 84% of parents see the importance of having their child with a health condition, special educational need and or disability, SEND, participate in swimming. Yet children and young people with SEND are less likely to report that they enjoy or feel confident in taking part than those without. As I said, I think swimming at school in an environment that learners with additional needs feel comfortable in and are familiar with offers a great introduction to the pool environment and can really help build their skills and confidence for lessons outside of school. It also offers opportunities for those learners who may never access swimming lessons outside of school to learn an essential life-saving techniques. In case they do ever find themselves in danger unexpectedly, which of course is one of the most important reasons for learning to swim at school age. The second insight is from our Swim England Insights team's Parents Perception Survey in 2018. Over half of parents say swimming lessons have improved their child's self-esteem as well as health and fitness. So I think this really highlights what we already know about swimming and physical activity, is that it's clearly important for long-term health and well-being that school pupils of all abilities engage in school sport. And this is where I'd like to hand over to you, Rob and Linda. Are these kind of insights familiar to you, and do you share similar views about why school swimming is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. For us in Dorset, we are a coastal region. I'd like to say it was sunny all the time, but it's not. And one thing that we picked up is that a lot of SEND children were really in need of that water safety element around swimming. And it was very evident that lots of children were not exactly getting that experience.
Okay, yeah, in Kirklees, we're not a coastal area, but we've found that the children all go swimming, but they have very different experiences of that. And there were issues with certain children who had SEND in mainstream education, accessing the swimming, and teachers finding it difficult sometimes with those children by not knowing their needs.
And why do you think the teachers found it difficult, Linda? Do you think it was something to do with like the fear factor?
No, it wasn't a fear factor from the teachers because the teachers are fab, but what it was, it's a communication of not knowing what was coming beforehand. So they weren't really. It's okay if you're getting a special school coming with where everybody's got a disability or a need, but actually when you were getting people in mainstream education with SEND, then that's when the difficulties came, because the teachers are not aware of who was coming and what the needs were before they actually came. So it was difficult to plan in because of that communication issue. I'll just bring in Gemma here, who might give you a bit of perspective from the teacher's point of view.
Yeah, I think we've got some fantastic SEND schools that are coming in, and like Linda says, with specialised teachers and smaller groups, it's been very well received. But when in September, when we can get up to 60 new children coming through into the school swim programme, we don't have any previous knowledge on any of the swimmers' ability, whether it's in the water or behavioural at all. So I think, you know, the first sort of September through to the first half term is very much trying to understand the individual children, and sometimes those can be the most important weeks in terms of their experience. So we are just discussing at the moment, and part of this has been the engagement and how that's helped us. We only took school swimming on from the council in April last year, so it's very much a learning process for us at the moment. So obviously we're appreciating kind of being involved with the project and being able to identify some of these things to improve the swimmers going forward.
Great, thank you for that. So I just wanted to run through a little bit of current activity that we're doing to support the project. I'm going to quickly cover the Swim England Inclusion Hub, Big School Swim campaign, CPD and resources from the Swim England perspective, and then Vicky's going to talk a little bit about the National Swim Group, RLSS, and the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Swimming. So I'm just going to take the screen now and just share our Inclusion Hub and give you a little tour of it if you're not already familiar. If you just go to swimming.org/inclusion, you'll come to this hub. This is launched in September this year, and it provides everything you need to know about inclusion, equality and diversity in the Learn to Swim programme, school swimming and beyond. It's full of free resources, signposting and grassroots guidance for swimming teachers and pool operators who have links with someone with additional needs when it comes to swimming. It also provides guidance for parents and carers and learners themselves, so it's a good place to reference customers to should they ask about what support is out there. So I think the areas of this hub that are particularly useful for our listeners today will be the business support for inclusion, the inclusion guidance and resources for swimming teachers, and of course inclusion in school swimming. If I just click on inclusion guidance and resources for swimming teachers, you'll see this is a great example of the other sorts of things that are available in the hub. It's full of tools and resources, all free to use, all signposting to where you can find more information to ensure that your swimming lessons are as inclusive as possible. And then if I just go back, I will take you to the inclusion in school swimming part of the hub, where it links through to the Inclusion 2020 page. And this is where you will be able to access more information about what Swim England has done specifically to support the Inclusion 2020 project, and also to access the resources that we've produced so far. So this leads me on nicely to talk about our new school swimming assessment tool, which is here and free to download from the Inclusion 2020 page. This tool has been piloted by the lead inclusion schools in the project, and I know that Rob and Linda will be talking about their experiences with it in a moment. Essentially, the tool is a free resource which has been produced by the Swim England Insights team. It's an action planning document that will help facilitate roundtable discussion between schools and their local pool providers, so they can sit down and assess their current provision, identify barriers to participation for SEN pupils because of their provision, and identify realistic solutions, and then take action to successfully implement those solutions to improve opportunities. So that can just be downloaded right here from the Inclusion Hub. It can be printed, but we recommend filling it online digitally. It's very, very easy to use and self-explanatory, so do take a look at that after the event. I'll provide links at the end of the event as well, so that you'll know where to be able to access it. I'll move on as well to the Big School Swim campaign. So the Big School Swim campaign is an annual campaign that celebrates swimming in schools. Every November, schools across the country get involved in our Big School Swim activity sessions. All schools that sign up get a free activity pack, which includes lesson plan templates and lots of fun activity ideas designed to get pupils of all abilities in the water and enjoying their swimming. Big School Swim activities help pupils learn important new swimming and water safety skills with others without it feeling like a formal lesson, which is why it's so great for learners with additional needs. We've been promoting Inclusion 2020 alongside Big School Swim this year, encouraging all schools that get involved to keep inclusion really at the forefront of their Big School Swim activity. We went down to one of the lead inclusion schools to watch their adapted Big School Swim activity session this year. We produced a great little video, which I'll provide a link for at the end of the session. It's really lovely to watch, and it really captures the essence of what Big School Swim is about. And because we promoted Inclusion 2020 alongside the Big School Swim campaign, this gave the project exposure to 6,000 schools and almost 70,000 children who took part. So we're really pleased with that. If you're interested in signing up for Big School Swim, the sign up page, if you just Google Big School Swim, it'll come up first in your search results. I'll also supply a link at the end of the session. We're also doing a lot of work about CPD, designed specifically for school teachers and swimming teachers, delivering school swimming programs to SEN pupils. That's been developed in partnership with one of the lead inclusion schools, and so the program is really built on real life experiences of SEN school swimming teachers. There's a particular focus in those CPD on how to make easy adaptations to lesson programs with limited pool space and time, and there are also techniques to combat that fear factor that so many teachers have. Okay, I will now pass on to Vicky, who will cover a little bit more about the National Swim Group, RLSS and the Parliamentary Group.
Great, thank you, Jess. And I think just to pick up there in terms of the range of resources that are being developed, that have been developed, I think what has come through really strongly from this particular project and being able to link directly with schools and pool operators has been they've been really able to influence those new resources and also identify the gaps of where there have been challenges either in terms of skill sets or just resources available, and being able to really influence that. And I know Linda Robb will share a little bit around some of the resources that they've used, for example swim picks and things that they'll bring to life shortly. All I wanted to do really was just highlight about how much this is really at the heart of the school swimming and water safety offer generally, in terms of it's being talked about at a policy level, it's being talked about nationally as part of that National Swim Group that many of you will be aware of, in terms of how that group contains representatives from across the swimming sector, really looking at how they bring the sector together and work on key areas. It's been referenced at various APPGs, so as I mentioned, those all-party parliamentary groups. And interestingly as well, some of the work that is starting to be developed from this, and again, schools just being really vocal and sharing where they would value the greatest support. An example there is just with RLSS around their Drowning Prevention Week. And actually really great timing of having the webinar today. This morning I have been with RLSS, really looking at their resources as part of Drowning Prevention Week next year, and actually really ensuring they're as inclusive, inspirational, accessible, and as meaningful as they can be for young people with special educational needs and disabilities. Okay, I'll pass you over back to Jess.
Thanks very much, Vicky. So I'm just going to quickly run through the national summaries of findings and some of the challenges that have come up from using the school swimming assessment tools, challenges that have been identified. And then Rob and Linda will go into a little bit more detail on their local and personal experiences and some of the solutions that they've identified and are in the process of implementing at the moment. So if we could just move on to the next slide, Vicky, thank you. So here's just an overview of some of the current insights. So I'll just read through them. In some cases, those with specific disabilities and or advanced SEND were not accessing any school swimming. This is often because of the fear factor from teachers who are afraid they won't know how to deal with learners with additional needs in sports and physical activity contexts. Also, lack of facilities was another really key thing, things like time and transport and funding as well, all big challenges there. There was reduced awareness about the specific school swimming and extracurricular opportunities for pupils with SEND, largely because I think people don't know where to go to find out, and they're not completely aware of support that's available, and we're really hoping to crack down on that and provide more guidance in that area. There was a heavy reliance on school staff to deliver school swimming, and generally concurrent with that, unfortunately, not enough training. And that's where the new CPDs that we've been preparing with County Durham and Milton Keynes will really come into use. There's also limited pool time and pool temperature were also identified as challenges. Pool time being that sometimes there's only enough time, say 20 minutes for a swimming lesson, and that's only enough time really to build water confidence, not the specific swimming skills to get children up to that standard where they can swim 25 meters. Temperature, almost always too cold, was another thing that was raised. Lack of awareness, a lot of the time pool operators aren't aware that there are SEN pupils in swimming classes. This is particularly when there are SEN pupils in mainstream settings. So they don't know to make provisions for them. So sometimes something that Linda touched upon earlier, just improved communication, is key to resolving that. On facility, some of the lowest scores were around changing area facilities and the atmosphere in the changing areas and on poolside. Here are just a couple of pieces of feedback from some of the schools who have completed the assessment tool. These I'll send around these slides afterwards so that you can have a full read through, but these generally focus on the fact that the cubicles are often small, they're dirty, there's lack of seating for those with mobility issues as well.
And I think, Jess, if I can just interject there, what is quite interesting, and I think the way that the assessment tool is being used, and I know Linda and Rob will bring this to life, is it's a starting point for a conversation. And actually what started to come out from the audits that have been completed through the 5 areas when people have worked together on them is sometimes the school perspective can be very different to the pool's perspective, particularly when it comes to facility. So just want to listen out for as we go through the webinar.
Absolutely. And the next is on awareness. Lowest scores was awareness of the pupils' parents to the benefits of swimming. Again, here are just a couple of pieces of feedback. This focuses on inconsistent support from parents and often parents failing to see the benefits of swimming. Again, that's something to do with lack of knowledge and lack of education as to why swimming and water safety are so important. Staff, so lowest scores were for training, knowledge and skills of staff to teach swimming to pupils with SEND. This is often lack of knowledge for those with complex SEND and swimming staff not trained to support specific requirements. And I'll just hand this over now to Linda and Rob. I'm really keen to hear how you found using the tool and what challenges and particularly what solutions you've identified to date.
Yeah,
You go first, Rob.
so in Dorset, it's been really, really useful using this tool. And we didn't use it in isolation. So we quickly, through working with that active partnership network, sussed out that part of their remit through the primary sports funding was to look at swimming and make sure that schools were really engaging with swimming, specifically with SEND children. So we were able to kind of push the tool out with that, which had a much bigger impact on who was filling it in. And everything that you've just gone through is really resonates with me. So there is most definitely a fear factor, particularly with different specific types of disability. So the more profoundly children are affected, the harder it is to get them swimming, particularly in mainstream schools. And the more reasons there are not to go swimming. And generally that is because staff are just really worried about it. So that was one thing. Where parents participate, that seemed to make things a lot more successful. So one school properly interacts with parents, and then the ability to offer swimming both in school and to make that flow out of school is a lot more successful. So that was really important part for us as well.
Okay, I think for us in Kirklees, we're very lucky really in that our school swimming is all delivered by Kirklees Active Leisure and by swimming teachers there who are qualified and well trained in it. So that's not too much of an issue for us, the training of the actual teachers. I think the main several issues though, it depends on which pool the children are going to. If they're at the nice new leisure centre, then everything's absolutely fantastic and they've got everything they need. But there are some of the older pools where there aren't hoists, or it's upstairs to changing rooms and things like that, which are obviously an issue for some of the children we're talking about. Also, I think some of the children not comfortable in the swimming environment came up as an issue. So if they've never been to the swimming pool before, and we've got areas where children are not taken swimming, so they've never really been, and it's quite a big thing for them to go and to actually experience that environment. So that came out as quite an issue really. And I think perhaps the other thing that came out was the knowledge of the school staff that were attending and how they could actually support, and they didn't really feel they could support, they didn't really know what they were doing. So quite a few things have come out of that, really positive. First of all, the great links we've now got with the leisure centre and the Kirklees Active Leisure who provide everything. So we've really developed quite a strong link with them now. We're setting up meetings with teachers who support the children swimming so that we can talk about what we need to know beforehand and making sure that we've really looked at the communication issues so that we're going to make sure that the swimming staff know who's coming, know the issues that are coming, and the schools know about the sports centres, the swimming pools, and possibly even bring the children before their actual swimming lessons so they can go around and have a look and see what's expected of them when they actually arrive. So those are probably the main issues I think that we've come across in Kirklees as a result of the audit.
The other thing that we really found was that swimming starts a long time before children get into the swimming pool. So the more school staff understood that, where they might be seeing a kind of adverse reaction from children when they got to the leisure centre, it really does start back at school in the classroom and is very much around how children are prepared for what's going to happen. So, you know, they're going to somewhere new, as Linda said. They might be going to a changing room. The changing room might be cold. It might have all sorts of sensory impact on them. So by the time they even get to the swimming pool, they might be having all sorts of kind of adverse reactions. So looking at how we use kind of either low-tech or high-tech communication back in the classroom, like PECS, to introduce what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and why it's going to happen just has a massive impact positively.
Yeah, I'll add into that as well about the SwimPix cards. I know one of my schools said they'd be really useful to use in school as well before they go, so they can explain those and show them before they actually go to the lesson. So again, it's that communication of knowing what's coming, and then they can use those cards in school. The autistic children go, and it's not such a shock when they get there. They know what's gonna happen, and recognise the cards when they actually get to the swimming pool.
Do you want to just we've just been doing some we've started doing assemblies now as well with the school, with the year group that are going to go the following year. Just again, it's that different phase, different teacher, different instructions. So we've literally only started doing them this week, where we've been out to visit some of the schools where have been highlighted as where we need to make some improvements, so that the school swimming teachers have been doing some water safety. They've been using some of the cards and just taking bits of equipment as well to the school, and doing an assembly, so we can start the engagement now rather than on the first day of school swimming in September.
And so I think most people here will be really keen to know how you go about starting to fill in the tool. If you're a school and you want to kind of get a roundtable discussion with your local pool provider, how do you make a start? What did you do first of all to get those people together in that room?
To get them to fill the audit in, I contact the Senkos at the school rather than PE leads, because they tend to be the people who will fill this sort of thing in. So that's what I did, and I sent. I'd been to a meeting with all the Senkos in the authority, told them about this project we were involved in, and warned them that this would be coming their way. Then I emailed it out to them, and a lot of them sent those back to me, completed, and it was just a case of pushing the Senkos, but they were the ones who were really instrumental in completing the audits, or getting the right person to complete that audit for me.
And for us, like I said before, we very much went through Active Dorset, who have got that kind of primary sports funding remit, and also our school games networks. So we looked at schools who we knew had different cohorts of children within them, and then sat down with them and supported them to be really honest when they were filling out the forms, which gave us, I think, a much better result.
Okay, great. And as a result of your efforts, how many people have you actually managed to get involved, approximately? How many people have you managed to get involved in your audit for your local area to be able to identify those challenges and solutions?
I think I had returns of about 15 schools that actually responded to the actual audit and completed it. But I have had extra schools on top of that who now involved. In fact, we're hoping really to involve every school, because every school's got SEND. So we're making everybody aware of it, but obviously the ones that responded to the audit were the ones we're starting with, really.
And I think for us, it's the results that we had, because it was so targeted, because we selected schools, were not massive, but it gave us really great insight. And actually that insight has allowed us to now work with the head teacher networks to make sure that every school's aware of the tool. So going forwards, I think we're going to have that going out to all head teachers in Dorset. So it's going to give us a much better picture.
Okay, fab. And just to close off, we'll start with Linda. Can you give 3 top tips, 3 takeaways, if you were to say anything about either use of the audit tool, solutions, or any challenges that you've come across? What would your 3 top tips be about carrying out an audit like this for a school and their local area?
The first tip is definitely to get to the right person. If you just send it to a school office address, it's not going to get done. So again, like Rob said, go through your school games organizer. I'm lucky I am a school games organizer as well, and we have great links with all the schools. So if you go through the school games organizer, they should know the right person to get the audit to. That's the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is link with the Senkos as well. That's really, really important there, because again, they are really concerned about these children and really keen to get the best deal for them. And finally, it's about communication with your swim providers and your schools. That's so important to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on and we're really working together for positive outcomes.
Great, and the same question to Rob.
Yeah, sure. So we found that working with partners was really, really effective, and kind of strategically through conversations at that kind of county-wide groups, found that Public Health England have a very similar agenda to us. So we quickly established partnerships with the primary care networks, and they've been extremely helpful from a slightly different outcome focus, but giving us a real steer as to how schools are engaging with them and what outcomes swimming will have with them. So I would say that working with partners, particularly outside of our sector into the health sector, has been extremely helpful. Kind of second top tip is be there, be ready to answer questions. There will be questions that come your way. So either field those questions through your partners in health or active partnerships. But I think once schools and school staff start really thinking about it, if they're being really honest, they will have more questions than answers. So being able to have partners able to answer those questions is really important. And as Linda said, I think it's not just the PE staff which are going to help you be successful. Using SENCOs or health and wellbeing leads in schools is really, really effective because it connects their agenda so much more than we realise.
Okay, that's great. And there's just one final question for me. What are your next steps for your projects? Where do you see them going next? Rob, we'll start with you.
Yeah, great. So we really wanted to tackle this kind of identified fear factor. And the fear factor is well placed. It's worrying with health and safety and everything else that goes along with it. That there's a risk to taking children swimming. So again, we're working with our primary care networks to identify physio or occupational therapists to upskill staff so that we kind of get rid of some of those negative perceptions around swimming. So that's one big thing that we're going to be doing. And we're also looking, the Health Agenda has highlighted that children on or with autistic spectrum disorder are more likely to be obese as they leave school and go into adulthood because of their kind of, in many cases, not able to interact with other people in the kind of traditional games elements. And of course, swimming is one of the best things that can be used for that. So that we're working now with some of our leisure providers to look at kind of expanding what they do with ASD children, look at their swimming sessions. Can they put on ASD swimming sessions with smaller numbers, with different lights, with different access, and can they run general swimming sessions around children with autism, which is going down really positively with the leisure providers.
Okay, that sounds fab. And I asked the same question.
Oh, sorry, Jess, if I just may interject there as well, just to build on Rob, because as I mentioned, we've got 2 of the 5 areas on the webinar directly hosting it today, but actually we know there's incredible work going on across all of the 5 areas involved. And I know a number of them, exactly as you say, Rob, it's around how can we help open those lines of communication and also challenge both pools and schools in terms of what else can we be doing to really support the whole journey for our pupils. And as both Rob and Linda have already said, it's not necessarily going straight in at the pool time level, but actually, you know, the ideas of the assembly is to be able to make young people feel really comfortable with the teacher, the types of equipment, actually to experience, even if that's virtual or via photographs or films, as you'll allude to in terms of that sensory environment. Actually, all these different things can really help support our young people to feel confident and comfortable before they actually make that transition into water. And one of the ones that I know some of the schools, particularly in Northamptonshire, have shared is the Access Able app. So again, if schools or pools are listening, if you're not aware of that, it's well worth a look in terms of that brings up what might be in your local area, and again, different photographs and images that you could use to help support some of the more anxious children around actually knowing what the environment will look like before they get there. So sorry to interrupt, I just thought that stimulated a bit of a thought there.
Okay, I think our next steps, quite a lot really. I feel we just sort of started on the programme, and making the links with the providers has been absolutely fab. So we've got a lot of things in the plan. First of all, I think a big thing we're going to do is a lot of teacher training, really making sure that the teachers meet, the swimming teachers meet the school teachers beforehand. And I've explained what's going to happen and how we can actually improve the communication of the children's needs before they arrive. We're going to look at actually going into doing the assemblies, rolling that out to more and more schools, and hopefully to every school eventually, so that again the children, like we said earlier, have got that knowledge and understanding of what to expect when they arrive. And again, possibly rolling out some visits to the centres before they actually come, if that's felt it would help children there. We're also looking at really using the resources. We've got the new SwimPix cards and trying to get more of those, so we've got them in all the centres, and that the staff have access to those as well. I think Kirklees Active Leisure, the swimming staff that they use for the schools are the same as they use for their other sessions, their club sessions and various other programs they do. So they're really trying to link the two together so that the children feel more confident to go to the sessions in the community, because they'll already know the teachers. And I think that'll be a big thing for developing the children. And I think the other thing we're really looking at doing, and we've booked in now for the summer term, is an aqua festival for children with special needs, which hasn't really happened before. So we're going to try and set that up and do that during the day in the summer term. So lots to happen. I think lots is going to come as a result of this, but I do feel we're still at the very early stages at the moment.
That's great, thanks Linda. And just to elaborate on, you mentioned SwimPix cards. For those of you who don't know, SwimPix cards are developed by aswim.uk, and they are poolside flashcards that help with communication and planning during lessons. They're designed specifically for learners with additional needs, particularly on the autistic spectrum, and they teach core aquatic skills and other key skills in water safety. Now, this last slide is just a few useful links which we've kind of referenced during the presentation today. I will send around an email to everyone who has attended with the full presentation, plus some notes that I made based on what Rob and Linda have shared today. And also, when I send around that, you'll have my email address. So if you do have any additional queries or questions regarding CPDs or what's next in terms of resources that Swim England or the Inclusion 2020 project is developing, then you'll have a point of contact there. Thank you very much everyone for attending. We hope you found this session really useful, and we'll hopefully see you again at our next webinar.